Hi, I'm Zoe. Welcome back to the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on amazing videos. The Holy Spirit just made me smile. Um, we just had a private joke, and so I've been sitting on this message. Okay, so I asked God a question about 2 weeks ago, and He answered, but the answer was really simple. I didn't trust the answer, and God has really been teaching me how to trust the convictions of my heart. So the answer was really simple. I didn't trust it, but the more I yielded myself to understanding, He literally was saying the same thing but explaining it more. So ask God questions, He likes it, and the Bible says that it's the glory of the Lord to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of a king to search it out. So it's His glory to be hidden, and yet He likes to be found. He likes to be pursued. He enjoys it. It's in fact His pleasure. He finds pleasure in our questions, because when we are seeking, we are finding. We are finding. It's our glory to search it out, to find Him out, to have revelation of Him. So really it's our responsibility, and He likes it when we ask questions, because how else will we find Him except we ask? So I'm really a why person. Like, I like to ask God why, and the only reason why I'm okay with asking why is because I realize He loves it, that I like to understand Him. He likes to be understood. So, I always ask Him why. My daughter is always asking me why. She's 5 now, and she's always asking why. I'm not irritated at all by it, and my patience with her is sponsored by the fact that I like to understand too. So when she's always asking me why, I love it. In fact, if she didn't ask why, I'd have a problem. So anyway, so the wisdom of Pharaoh. I asked God the question, why Pharaoh? Why is it Pharaoh that God chose to use to lift Joseph? Or why is Pharaoh the one God chose to commit such a great purpose to? Because God fed the entire earth during Pharaoh's time through the nation of Egypt during Pharaoh's reign. So what is it about Pharaoh that what is it about Pharaoh that God found usable? I really asked this question because I was thinking, Jacob probably could have used this relevant. Why did God choose to use Pharaoh? And as God taught me, I learned a lot from the revelation that He gave me, and I'd like to share, and I feel like I want to just encourage everybody watching that ask God questions. When you see God use people the way He uses people, you can ask Him why them. And every time you ask God why in the context of a person He has used, you're really asking for Him to reveal a pattern to you. And in the previous post we talked about patterns. You can follow a pattern. As long as you follow a pattern, you're going to see the end result of that pattern. So every time you like somebody's result, more than just to mimic the result, like, find out the pattern, find out the spirit sponsoring the pattern and the result. So the wisdom of Pharaoh. First of all, in case you don't know, there's a guy called Joseph. Joseph spent the Bible records he spent 13 years in prison. He was 17 when he was sold off into slavery by his siblings. They were jealous, blah blah blah. And then when he's sold off, he goes to Egypt. He was favored by his father, and he had these crazy dreams that were insinuating that his siblings would serve him. So he revealed these things to them innocently, and yeah, they sold him off into slavery, and he spent years in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife accused him of rape, so he was imprisoned. Then in prison he meets the king's two of the king's servants, a baker and a cup bearer. He interprets their dreams, and then the dreams were literally exactly what he had predicted, what he had interpreted. And he tells one of the guys that when you're reinstated, don't forget about me, tell the king about me. But when this guy gets out of prison, he forgot about Joseph. And then 2 years later, God gives Pharaoh a dream. And yeah, so hence my question, why Pharaoh? So, like, why is it that God chose Pharaoh? So the answer God gave me was that Pharaoh was the guy that would not abuse Joseph's gift. That's the answer, the simple answer that God gave me. Now, as I yielded more to understanding, God reveals the wisdom upon this man, Pharaoh. Pharaoh, first of all, understood that without revelation of the interpretation of his dream, he was one move away from a disastrous decision. Pharaoh had a dream, like all of us, we go to bed, have dreams, but the truth of the matter is, how many times do you actually dream something and you invest yourself to get to understand, you invest yourself to revelation and understanding of what you have dreamt. The thing about Pharaoh was, Pharaoh, from how he handled his situation of having a dream, we can tell that Pharaoh loved to understand. Pharaoh understood the value of understanding as a leader. So he knew that if a leader doesn't have correct interpretation of vision, a leader can end up making a disastrous decision. And he knew that his decisions literally affect not just him, but affect everybody he is leading, everybody he is responsible for. So for that reason, Pharaoh couldn't just let this go. He knew, I need to get understanding. I need to get interpretation. I have dreamt something. I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm not going to take it like any other dream. I believe he knew that there is, dreams are supernatural. People don't just dream dreams. We all go to bed and have dreams, but the dreams that you dream, even like a dream, like I want to be a doctor one day, I want to be let's say you want to be an artist, an amazing artist or an amazing poet. You're so artistic and creative and you have this grand dream, and then there's also those dreams where you go to bed and dream. Either way, dreams are supernatural. These ideas that come into, like, these ideas that are imparted within our minds, let's say, or within our conscience, don't just happen. Like, this guy had that understanding. The vision that you have for your life, it's not random, it's not sponsored by just you, a person. There is a spirit behind it. See how somebody can get up in the morning and they feel suicidal? There is a spirit sponsoring that. Like, you have this vision, and your vision is to end your life. Your vision is to, just end it. That is sponsored by something. So Pharaoh had this wisdom that, any dream that a person may dream, whether it's in the context of, I went to bed and I dreamt I had a dream, or in the context of what you want to be when you, in the future, the projections you have for your life. These don't just happen. They happen by a spirit. We are using the context of Pharaoh, but for you and I that are children of God, we know that these are sponsored by God, and you can tell when there are those other dreams. For example, suicide is not sponsored by the Spirit of the living God. You don't need to end your life. You can yield yourself to God, whatever it may be. It could be depressed or sad, or there could be an occurrence that has happened in your life and you feel like, I don't see a future beyond this. I remember when I read Samson's story, when he asked God to like give me strength that I could kill everybody, that like when he held the pillars and he asked God for strength one more time, when I read that story, I felt like it was so sad. There is so much more. I mean, if God had allowed his hair to start to grow back again, that means God could restore this guy. That means that, that his mistake was not the end of his story, period. His mistake was not the end of his story. Those Philistines that were in the stadium that day with him were not the only Philistines that still existed. So for as long as, see, God had created him to be the in between, to be the defender of the children of Israel against the Philistines. So for as long as there were still Philistines alive, Samson still had purpose. That day, I feel like he prayed the wrong prayer. Suicide was not the option, really. Oh, if you see things like I do, I feel like Samson committed suicide that day. He asked God to help him commit suicide. God could have still done amazing things through Samson. So really, your mistakes are not the end of the story. There is so much. For as long as God is the one that is inspiring the vision, inspiring the dreams that you have, that you know that you have, that you know have been revealed to you. The Bible tells us that nothing can thwart the purposes of God. And I have found that for as long as you believe the word of God, if you believe that nothing can thwart the plans and purposes of God, indeed, nothing can thwart them. It's only if you doubt that word that you don't see the manifestation of that word in your life. So anyway, Pharaoh knew dreams don't just happen, don't just come. There is something sponsoring this, and I need to get to the bottom of this thing. I need to have understanding. He would not have sought for understanding unless if he knew the value of understanding. That if I don't understand as a leader, if I don't have correct revelation of this dream, correct interpretation of this dream, I am one move away from a disastrous decision that's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect everybody I'm responsible for. So he couldn't move forward without understanding. He knew right understanding, right perception, right perspective, our vision, our direction. And without vision, direction, guidance, there's no cause for moving forward. Like he knew, listen, the Bible tells us that without vision, we cast restraint. Without vision, we die. If you don't see a tomorrow, there's nothing to live for. There's nothing to invest yourself toward. So if you don't see where you're going, if you don't have revelation of where you're going, there's no need to move forward. There's no motivation to move forward. So he knew that when I have understanding, I have vision. When I have right interpretation of this dream, I have vision. And another thing that you need to realize is that Pharaoh's life was probably amazing. What I mean to say is that this dream literally came as an interruption to his to status quo, like how things were. Probably life was okay, life was peaceful, but a dream came and interrupted his program. But he didn't what can I put it, how God can come and just literally disorganize your life. You're going one way and then God begins to just show you things that contradict how you thought you were moving, like contradict what you are doing right now in order to get to the tomorrow you intended to get to on account of what you're doing right now. He didn't let that frustrate him out of understanding, frustrate him. What I can say is Pharaoh was not a small-minded guy. He was an open-minded guy. He was flexible, if I may. He was flexible. Like, this is what's happening now. I need to understand and reposition myself if I must, in order to arrive into tomorrow smoothly equipped and be successful in tomorrow that is being revealed through this dream. So yeah, he paid the price. Now, after understanding that I do not know, first of all, what this dream means, he knew he had to pay that price in order to receive understanding. So he paid the price. He had to call people. I don't know it all. I'm Pharaoh, but I still don't know it all. So he called his people. I believe these were the people that were interpreting dreams for him, interpreting the times and the seasons for him, helping him to have understanding of the times and the seasons and know what, they ought to do in order to successfully maneuver the times and seasons and be positioned to enter into tomorrow successfully. So he paid the price. He called people, yielded himself to them, but they didn't know what to do. But the thing is, he was relentless. He didn't give up on searching for answers, solutions, when those he expected to have them did not have them. He still yielded himself, like, I'm not settling for not having answers. He was relentless. I have to understand. Now, when the person that had the understanding came, this person probably didn't look like a diplomat, probably didn't look like this educated person, this educated guy. We all know that a few moments later, after Joseph comes on the scene, he is promoted to prime minister. But this prime minister was not an educated guy. Joseph had not been educated. He had spent his life in prison. But prison cells are education too. Listen, within the context of God. So, Pharaoh's humility. Pharaoh was humble enough to receive direction from a guy that did not look like a one that could give direction. Pharaoh didn't go looking to the prison in order to receive interpreters. He had his people that he saw looked like they had the ability to interpret, but when they all failed, he didn't give up. He kept searching, and God brings Joseph to the table. And it took humility. Do you know, like, when I really think about this Pharaoh guy, this is something really God taught me a few years ago. Don't ignore people. Many times you see how that guy that was a leper in the Bible, and it was a slave girl, his wife's slave Naaman. He had leprosy. Yeah, he was a leper. Yeah, he was a leper, and a slave girl is the one that gave him the answer to his healing, the solution to his healing. You will be amazed at how this was lowly Joseph. Lowly Joseph came and literally gave Pharaoh, Joseph had within him the success of Pharaoh, packaged in a lowly guy. So if Pharaoh wasn't humble enough, if he didn't have the attitude of answers can possibly come from anybody, from anyone, that takes humility. Jesus, the Savior of the whole earth, can be born in a manger, he was born with animals, in a crowd. You understand? Like, you'll be amazed. Like, there are people that are full of answers and full of solutions. They don't look like it, but they are it. Like, you have no idea what people's stories are, how God has equipped people. You shouldn't I feel like it's putting your mind in a box. You shouldn't imprison your mind to thinking that God can only work how you think he should work, or that God only works how he has dealt with you. You will be so amazed at the treasure in earthen vessels, in vessels that don't look like they've got this treasure in their vessels. So yeah, this took humility and transformation. I thought it took sorcerers, I thought it took diviners, but the transformation was, listen, there is this guy, talking about a God. This God interprets dreams, and this God is seated in a vessel that's been in prison all its life. So this really took humility. Transformation takes humility. In that moment, there was a transformation that happened to Pharaoh's mind. I had an expectation when I came to the table. I came at this situation, at this problem, with a certain mindset. But he, because of his humility and his hunger for understanding because he knew the value of understanding, the value of right interpretation. You can't afford to look at life. Listen, you can't afford to misinterpret the voice of God. In this context of Pharaoh, still this was the voice of God, but he didn't have understanding really. This was God in play, but Pharaoh didn't know God. He got to know God through Joseph. But you can't afford to misunderstand the voice of God. You can't afford to ignore. Like, God can speak to you through anybody. That person you look down at might be the answer to your problem, might be the voice of right interpretation. That question you've had in, like, within you, that question that you keep searching east, west, south, north, center, in vessels that you know, according to your own understanding, feel like are it, that don't have it. Could be this person has the answer, that has the solution. But unless you have this humility and the yieldedness for your mind to be transformed, that listen, there's a treasure in earthen vessels, and you know, earthen vessels can look like the Josephs that have not had education, that Josephs that have spent, you know, that have had traumatic situations and traumatic conditions. Today I was going somewhere very early in the morning, and I was having trouble like driving through a certain place, and the guy that gave me direction was drunk. Like, he was drunk, he was really really drunk and staggering, and I really smiled. Like, I just smiled at God, like, see God helping me through a drunk guy staggering. Anyway, so another thing was that, you know, he actually did receive vision and right interpretation from lowly Joseph, and this took humility and the yieldedness for his mind to be transformed. That, you know, understanding is not, I can't afford to be close-minded right now. I need interpretation. His future literally depended on it. So pride would have been his downfall. Pride would have been the downfall of the nation of Egypt, and pride would have, you know, taken him out of God's program. Yet God had brought gold, if I may, to Pharaoh through that dream, and interpretation of it through Joseph. I feel that the value of the dream was the interpretation of the dream, and the success of the interpretation of the dream was in the execution of the interpretation, and all these came through this lowly man, Joseph. So the third thing that this man was willing to do, like, he paid the price. First of all, he paid the price of relentlessness, like, I won't give up. Secondly, he paid the price of humility and transformation. Then the price of conference of honor. He didn't abuse Joseph's gifts. He didn't downplay Joseph's contribution. He didn't dishonor it. He knew the value of interpretation and execution. Like, it doesn't only end at the interpretation. I need right execution of this thing. So he knew the value of interpretation and execution. Both, if not done righteously, can be a move into establishment of evil. Ouch, I wrote that down. So if interpretation and execution aren't done righteously, they can be a move into establishment of evil, because it would have been evil for if he had not had the humility to hear Joseph out. I feel like this dream, I don't know, probably God would have given the dream to somebody else who would have then honored Joseph, because I feel that God was determined to raise Joseph. So it would have been evil. You know, Egypt was meant to be exempt. God had willed to exempt Egypt from the times that were coming ahead of them. So if he hadn't had the right interpretation, the evil that those years of famine was meant to bring would have been established. And if he had only stopped at using Joseph for the interpretation and had not had the wisdom to understand that that execution is as important as interpretation, he could have given the execution to men or women that weren't graced to execute God's vision. So just as God used Joseph for the interpretation, okay, So yeah, the last thing was he wasn't insecure. He was both a king and a kingmaker. Pharaoh was not just a kingmaker. He wasn't only a king. Pharaoh was also a kingmaker and a king. So this was Saul's mistake. Saul, Saul in the Bible, really, God, when I reached this bit of the explanation, God's explanation that Pharaoh wasn't insecure, he knew, I can lift you, I can confer honor, and I don't need to be insecure about it, because we can both be successful, and that's okay. We can all enjoy, and prosper on account of what God has given us, because God gave it to Pharaoh as well as having he did give it to Pharaoh as well as to Joseph, because Pharaoh had the dream, but Joseph had the interpretation. Without the dream, there was no need for interpretation, but without interpretation, the dream could have died. But the thing about this man Pharaoh, the wisdom of Pharaoh, is that Pharaoh was not an insecure guy. On the flip side of it, Saul was insecure. Saul, the one that was king before David, he was very insecure of David. He didn't know that you can actually raise a son, and a son can be great and be your successor and yet not dishonor you. So Saul could have probably could have passed on power to David without being insecure, but he did not have this wisdom. However, Pharaoh did have this wisdom. It's possible to be insecure. We can all see that it wasn't wisdom for Saul to fight David, because he was insecure about a boy that literally honored him till the very end. David wasn't looking to dishonor Saul. If Saul had been, let's say, like Pharaoh, and would have honored if Saul had been like Pharaoh and would have honored David, perhaps by the time Saul was leaving power, he wouldn't have left power the way he left. He wouldn't have delved into the evil that he ended up delving into and all that. So yeah, there was wisdom with this man, Pharaoh, and we can all learn something about this man. When you have a dream, seek out understanding. Don't just leave it there. Whether it's these dreams, like the night visions that you have, seek for understanding. Pay the price to receive understanding. Be humble. Understanding can come through just about literally. God can use anybody to give you understanding of your visions. And then when you receive interpretation, honor the vessels that God has used to give you interpretation of those dreams. I love you. Such an honor to share this with you.